There's a strange feeling that creeps in at quiet moments, a whisper beneath your thoughts. It doesn't speak in words, but in impressions, like déjà vu, like a dream you half remember but can't shake. Sometimes it visits in silence, in meditation, or in the spaces between your breaths. Other times it comes roaring in through emotions you can't explain or memories that don't seem to belong to this life. And still, despite all your logic and learning, something in you knows this life is not your beginning. It never was. You've been here before. And there's a reason that truth feels more like remembering than discovery. Your story didn't start the day you were born. It began long before you had a name or a body or a language to understand it. You weren't randomly assigned to this existence. You chose it, or rather, your soul did. But that choice wasn't made in a vacuum. It was part of a grander arc, a deeper curriculum. One crafted by a consciousness so vast, so timeless, that it holds every emotion, every intention, every dream you've ever carried across every life you've ever lived. Some call this fate. Others call it destiny. But neither term really fits. Because what's guiding your soul isn't blind luck or a cosmic script, it's memory. Not the kind stored in your brain, but in something older, something eternal. There exists a field beyond time and space, a realm so subtle that most people never even know it's there. And yet it surrounds you, infuses you. It is the invisible thread that connects all of life, the memory bank of the cosmos, a vibrational archive of every soul's journey. You don't need to see it to feel it. You've already brushed against it in moments of deep stillness, or when a single thought unlocks an emotion that feels ancient. You've touched it in dreams that seem to span lifetimes, or in those flashes of knowing that come from nowhere and change everything. That field has a name, the Akashic Records. The name Akashic comes from the ancient Sanskrit word Akasha, which means ether, spirit, or sky. In the cosmology of early India, Akasha was considered the fifth element, beyond earth, water, fire, and air. It wasn't simply poetic. It was the subtle fabric of existence, the essence from which everything emerges and to which everything returns. The ancients believed that nothing, no thought, no action, no intention was ever truly lost. It simply moved into the field of Akasha, where it was stored, remembered, woven into the fabric of time. The Akashic Records are not a literal book. There's no ancient library hidden in the mountains or secret scrolls locked away in temples. The records aren't bound by paper, place, or language. They are energy, frequency, consciousness, a non-physical dimension that stores the blueprint of your soul and everyone else's. Imagine it like a spiritual database, not filled with facts and figures, but with resonance, with emotional imprints and soul-level patterns. Every thought you've had, every lesson you've encountered, every life you've lived, they're all in there. Not forgotten, not erased, simply waiting for you to remember. And here's the part no one tells you. The Akashic Records aren't off limits. They were never meant to be hidden. The reason most people never access them isn't because they're unworthy or unready. It's because they were never told it was even possible. We've been conditioned to believe that wisdom lives in books, that truth is something handed down by experts or institutions, that to know who you are, you must ask someone else. But the records say otherwise. They whisper. The deepest truths aren't taught, they're recalled. They're not outside you, they're within you. You've always had access. You just needed to remember how to listen. Throughout history, mystics, seers, sages, and spiritual visionaries have described this field without ever naming it the same way. The Hebrews spoke of the Book of Life. The ancient Egyptians believed in a hall of records where every soul's deeds were kept. In Islam, it is known as the preserved tablet that records all things past, present, and future. Indigenous cultures across the globe, often silenced by colonization, have held oral traditions of soul memory, spiritual dreaming, and energetic maps of existence that mirror the Akashic concept. These weren't myths. They were living truths, experiences accessed in ceremony, prayer, trance, or silence. The language differed. The knowing did not. But over time, that knowing was dismantled, colonized, marginalized. It was mocked as superstition, banned as heresy, or buried beneath dogma. The burning of libraries, the silencing of shamans, the outlawing of spiritual practices, it was all part of the same strategy, to cut humanity off from the intuitive, eternal knowledge that lives beyond the senses. Because if people remember that their souls carry memory, that their truth is self-sourced, that authority begins within, not from government, not from temples, not from textbooks, it becomes a dangerous idea to any system built on control. If you remember who you are, then you cannot be controlled. And yet, despite every effort to erase it, the truth has survived. Quietly, in whispers, in dreams, in sudden awakenings that defy logic. It lives in you, in your pull towards something you can't name, in the feeling that your life is part of a story larger than what you've been told. You felt it when you meet someone for the first time but sense a history with them. You've tasted it when a place feels oddly familiar, when a fear seems to come from a place far older than your childhood. That's not coincidence. It's not fantasy. It's memory. Soul memory. Echoes from the records. You don't need to be psychic to access this field. You don't need a title or a lineage. What you need is presence. Stillness. A willingness to get quiet enough to hear what's already been echoing inside you. The Akashic records respond not to status, but to sincerity. They don't open for entertainment or control. They open for healing, for remembering. And when they do, they don't flatter your ego. They show you patterns, loops, stories you've lived out lifetime after lifetime, wounds passed down through generations, fears that no longer serve you. But within that reflection is a gift, the power to rewrite your experience, the ability to choose differently. Many people experience the records as a place of light, a massive temple, a library made of energy, a space filled with symbols, music, colors, or feelings that speak not to the mind, but to the soul. Some access them through guided meditation or prayer. Others through dreams, journaling, deep breathwork, lucid states, or sacred plant ceremonies. There is no single method. The technique matters far less than the intention. You're not looking for information. You're looking for resonance. Truth that doesn't just sound right, but feels right. In your bones, in your blood, in your soul. The records don't use language in the way we do. They don't speak in paragraphs or bullet points. They communicate in waves of knowing, in impressions that unlock understanding beyond words. You don't just learn from them, you remember. That's why so often, people return from the records with tears in their eyes, not because they read something shocking, but because they recognize something. Something their soul had been trying to say for years. Something they forgot, but never truly lost. And maybe that's why you're here now, reading this. Not because you stumbled on some mystical concept you've never heard of, but because something ancient inside you is stirring. Because your soul is tugging at you, gently, persistently, whispering that there's more to you than what the world has shown. That your life is not just a random sequence of events, but a continuation of something sacred. That your purpose isn't something to invent, it's something to remember. The Akashic records are not new. They are older than the stars, older than language. What's new is that more and more people are waking up to them again, feeling their pull, tuning in, and reclaiming the birthright of soul memory that was always theirs. You don't need a library card to access the Akashic field. You don't need anyone's permission, because the records were never meant to be owned or locked away. They were meant to be lived. This is not a teaching. It's a remembering. Not a philosophy, but a frequency. It's what happens when you finally get quiet enough to hear the story beneath the story. The one your soul has been trying to tell you. The one that doesn't begin at birth or end at death. The one that's still unfolding right now between every breath. So the question isn't, can you access the records? The real question is, what happens when you do? You are more than you've been told. Much more. And what's even wilder is that, without even realizing it, you've likely already accessed something ancient and profound, the Akashic records. Not in a mystical trance or a grand ritual, but in everyday moments. That gut instinct that saved you. The unexplainable moment when you knew what someone was going to say before they opened their mouth. The feeling that you've been somewhere before, even though you haven't. These moments aren't accidents. They're echoes, fragments of memory rippling through the veil, reminders that your soul has never been separate from the truth. It's been trying to speak through the noise, through the distractions of a world that's trained you to forget. We've been conditioned from birth to trust only what we can see, measure, and prove. We were taught to silence intuition and worship logic, to follow rules instead of wonder, to doubt anything that didn't fit into a textbook. But the soul doesn't speak in data points. It speaks in symbols, in dreams, in the quiet knowing that can't be rationalized. And it remembers everything. Because you didn't arrive here as a blank slate. You came with a blueprint, a soul-level design etched with lifetimes of experience, pain, joy, and growth. The Akashic records are not a fantasy. They are that blueprint. A field of memory that holds the truth of who you've been and the possibility of who you're becoming. Accessing the records isn't about escaping reality. It's about entering it more fully. Not to float away from the world, but to ground yourself deeper in it, with clarity, with purpose, with vision. When you remember the truth of your being, you stop living on autopilot. Life stops happening to you. Instead, you start co-creating it. Because remembering who you were is just the beginning. The real transformation begins when you remember why you came. This memory isn't passive. It's electric. It shifts how you move through life, how you respond to difficulty, how you view others, and how you tell your story. Once you've glimpsed the infinite and felt your place inside it, you can no longer believe the lie that you are small, broken, or powerless. You never were. The moment you were born, the world began handing you labels, names, beliefs, expectations, and somewhere in that avalanche of noise, you were told to forget. Forget your power. Forget your origins. Forget your knowing. This wasn't by accident. It was part of a system, one that relies on your disconnection to keep its illusion intact. But the soul doesn't forget easily. Even when you've buried it under years of programming, it keeps whispering. It speaks through déjà vu, through dreams that feel more real than waking life, through the inexplicable resonance with certain people, cultures, or time periods. These are not fantasies. They're fragments of your memory, pieces of your soul's history trying to surface. We've just been taught to call them coincidence, imagination, or worse, delusion. But they are the breadcrumbs leading you back to yourself. The records are not some faraway archive only accessible to mystics in robes. They are available to anyone willing to listen deeply, to feel honestly, and to remember bravely. They're not just libraries of past lives. They're mirrors of your present evolution. They hold the energetic residue of every choice you've made across lifetimes, what some call karma, what others call soul memory. But karma isn't punishment. It's not some cosmic slap on the wrist for doing something wrong. Karma is momentum. It's the ripple effect of past energy moving through time, seeking balance, resolution, and integration. If you betrayed someone in one life, you might feel a deep compulsion to protect in this one. If you silenced your truth for decades, you might now feel called to speak even if your voice trembles. These aren't random personality quirks. They are patterns, threads of emotion and intention weaving through the lifetimes. They show you where your soul has been and where it's trying to go. And then there are the soul contracts. Not rules, not rigid plans, but sacred agreements made before birth. These contracts draw certain people to us. Not always the easy ones. Sometimes it's the ones who challenge us the most. The lover who broke your heart. The parent who never understood you. The mentor who appeared out of nowhere and changed everything. These are often the ones your soul chose to grow with. The Akashic records help us see these connections, not so we can avoid the pain, but so we can understand it. Because when we understand the purpose behind the pain, it becomes fuel for our evolution. The power of the records is that they help you notice the patterns, the loops you've been stuck in, the cycles that repeat, the heartbreak that keeps wearing different faces, the fear that keeps finding new disguises, the sabotage that shows up right before your breakthrough. But once you see the pattern, you gain the power to rewrite it. Awareness is the catalyst for change. And conscious choice? That's alchemy. The beauty is, the records don't only show you where it hurts. They also reveal your gifts, your talents, your soul's genius. Because wisdom travels too. The healer who feels a pull toward plant medicine. The artist who paints visions they've never seen. The child prodigy who masters a language in weeks. These aren't accidents. These are memories resurfacing. They're echoes of mastery earned across lifetimes. When you remember your power, your purpose starts to unfold, not as a job description, but as a sacred expression of who you are. And when you truly grasp your soul's blueprint, comparison dissolves. You stop racing to match someone else's timeline. You stop looking sideways. You start trusting your own rhythm, your own process, your own divine unfolding. Because you begin to see your challenges not as blocks, but as initiations. Every breakdown becomes an invitation to remember. Every wound becomes an entry point to your wisdom. But here's the most liberating part. Your blueprint is not fixed. The past influences the present, but it does not trap it. Karma is not a life sentence. Soul contracts can be renegotiated. Patterns can be broken. The records aren't chains, they're maps. And maps offer paths, not prisons. You still choose your direction. You still hold the pen. And in every moment, you are either repeating the past or writing something entirely new. This is the truth that was buried. Because someone who remembers who they are, they can't be controlled. They don't blindly follow systems designed to keep them small. They see through illusion. And more dangerously, they help others see through it too. That's why mystics were burned, why shamans were silenced, why indigenous wisdom keepers were erased or rebranded. Because this remembering is dangerous to a world built on forgetting. And yet, the remembering continues. Through art, through dreams, through synchronicity, through the grief that cracks you open, through the clarity that comes out of nowhere. The Akashic records are not locked in some distant vault. They are within you. You've touched them already, you just didn't call it that. Even science is starting to catch up. Quantum theory shows us that reality isn't as solid as we once believed. Everything is energy, frequency, information. At the subatomic level, the universe looks more like a web of vibrating intelligence than a machine. The holographic universe theory suggests that every part contains the whole, just like every cell in your body holds the code of your entire being. What if the Akashic records are simply another layer of that hologram? What if memory energy and consciousness are all connected in ways we're only beginning to understand. Irvin Laszlo, a systems philosopher and two-time Nobel Peace Prize nominee, proposed that there is an Akashic field, a field of universal information underlying everything. To him, the Akashic records weren't myth. They were a scientific inevitability waiting to be explored. Even near-death experiences, long dismissed as hallucination, speak to this truth. People report life reviews not as judgment, but as deep understanding. They describe realms where every thought, every action, every ripple is felt and known. This isn't fantasy. It's remembering. The records don't ask you to believe in something new. They ask you to remember something ancient, something your soul has always known, that you are not separate. You are not random. You are not lost. You are part of a living field that remembers everything. And the most powerful part? It remembers you. It was never really about disbelief. That was just the surface. The real story, the deeper truth, it was always about suppression. A quiet silencing of the soul, a conditioning so thorough we forgot we were even asleep. But something is changing now. Cracks are beginning to form in the structure that once seemed so permanent, so unquestionable. The system, built on forgetting, is starting to crumble under the weight of remembrance. More and more people are waking up, not in revolt, not in rage, but in realization. They're no longer satisfied with answers that come from textbooks or polished newscasters. They feel something stirring, something ancient and undeniable, like a distant drumbeat echoing through their bones. It's not something you can explain to someone who's still asleep. It has to be felt. It's that strange pull towards something more, something real. And once that pull begins, once you start to remember, you can't go back. The process is irreversible. Memory, once reawakened, doesn't sleep again. Because when you remember who you are, truly remember, you don't just recall facts or timelines. You reclaim power. Not the loud, controlling kind of power, but the quiet, rooted, unshakable kind that lives in your core. You weren't meant to stay blind. You weren't designed to walk through life numbed out, constantly searching for meaning outside of yourself. You were built to remember. And what you're remembering isn't new. It's ancient, sacred. Yours, the Akashic records, were never hidden behind golden gates or locked in temples far away. They were never exclusive or elite. They've always been right here, within you, coded into your soul, folded between your thoughts, embedded in your breath. You were just taught not to look. You were trained to dismiss your intuition, to ignore the voice within. But now, you're starting to hear it again. You're looking inward. And that changes everything. Remembering isn't about time travel or regression. It's not about floating away to some ethereal realm. It's about going deeper into your own being. The records don't live in a distant galaxy guarded by mystics in robes. They live in the stillness you avoid. They live in the space between distractions, the silence beneath the noise. Accessing them doesn't require candles, rituals, or mantras, though those can help you focus. What it truly requires is presence. Not performance, not perfection, just presence. You don't need to be a guru or carry a spiritual resume. You only need the courage to sit with yourself and ask honest questions, the kind that don't seek answers so much as they seek connection. Questions like, why does this fear live in me? Why does this pattern keep returning? What am I not seeing about myself? The answers don't always come right away. Sometimes they appear as dreams, images, lyrics that hit you out of nowhere, or conversations that feel strangely timed. But they come, and when they do, they don't shout. They whisper. That's what throws most people off. We're conditioned to expect fireworks, dramatic visions, booming voices. But the Akashic records speak softly. They often sound like your own voice, only older, wiser, quieter, grounded in something timeless. Sometimes they come as a sensation, a pull in the gut, a wave of emotion, or an overwhelming sense of clarity. And just as quickly, they can vanish. You can't force them to appear. You can only make space for them to rise. Creating that space isn't complicated, but it requires intention, stillness, sincerity, a willingness to unplug from the constant barrage of noise and stimulation. That means choosing to be quiet when the world tells you to keep moving. Not because silence is trendy, but because it's necessary. It's the only place where truth can rise. It's in the stillness that your soul finally gets a chance to speak. Start with simple curiosity. Sit with your questions, not to find the fastest answer, but to reconnect. To feel, not what should I do, but what do I need to remember? Ask about the ache you carry for no clear reason, the dream that won't let go, the energy that feels stuck. Don't rush the response. Just sit, breathe, feel. The answer might rise immediately, or it might take time. It might come through symbols, through dreams, through art, through synchronicity. But it will come. Many people find that journaling helps, letting your thoughts flow freely, unfiltered. That's often when your logical mind steps aside just long enough for the deeper voice to emerge. Others experience an increase in vivid dreams or repeating numbers or uncanny coincidences. These are not accidents. They're signals. They're proof that your frequency is shifting, that you're tuning into something greater, something older than time. One of the most powerful keys to accessing the records is shadow work. Because the block isn't usually a lack of ability, it's fear. We avoid remembering because we're afraid of what we'll see, the choices we regret, the guilt we carry, the pain we've buried. But the records don't show you these things to hurt you. They show you so you can integrate, so you can heal. They don't expose to shame. They reveal to free. That's why the process can feel emotional. It's not just spiritual, it's cellular. The body remembers what the mind forgets. Tears may come. Grief may rise. You might feel like you're falling apart. But that's not you breaking. It's you reorganizing, realigning, clearing space for what was always yours. There is no one right path to remembering. For some, it's stillness. For others, breathwork, nature, movement, art. Because creativity is a portal. When you create from the soul, you're not just making art, you're decoding memory. You're speaking the language of the records without even realizing it. Music, dance, poetry, these are ancient tools, sacred frequencies. Sometimes a single line of a poem will remind you of more than an entire library ever could. You don't need a teacher. You need truth. You don't need enlightenment. You need embodiment. Just you, your heart, your breath, and the willingness to feel deeply and trust fully. You are not imagining this. You are not broken. You are not lost. You are remembering. And every time you reclaim a part of yourself, you come into greater alignment with who you've always been. Eventually, remembering becomes a way of living. Not a practice, but a presence. You begin to walk differently, speak differently. You no longer chase validation, you exude clarity. You stop reacting and start creating. You stop asking for permission and start embodying your truth. You realize your life was never meant to follow someone else's script. You were never meant to fit in. You were born to remind others of what's possible. And when enough people do that, the world doesn't just change, it remembers itself. Imagine a world where people no longer ask, "Who am I?" but instead whisper, "Who have I always been?" A world where we stop searching for identity in brands, systems, and roles, and start reclaiming it from the depths of our soul. A world where we no longer outsource our work, but carry it like breath. This kind of awakening doesn't cause chaos. It causes coherence. It doesn't burn systems down. It starves them of attention. It replaces fear with curiosity, scarcity with connection, control with truth. It is the quiet revolution, the gentle return, and it's already happening. You can feel it, can't you? People leaving relationships, jobs, belief systems, not because they read it in a book, but because their soul whispered, this isn't it. There's more. And that more isn't a destination. It's a frequency, a remembering. You were never a cog in a machine. You are not a random spark of consciousness trying to find purpose. You are an infinite being, carrying stories written in stardust and time. You are not here to escape this world. You are here to return to it fully, with your soul intact. All your life you were taught to look outward, to find answers in systems, teachers, institutions. But the real map was always inward. The Akashic records are not a myth or a fantasy. They are a living archive woven into your being, accessible the moment you become still enough to listen. You don't need to be perfect to access them. You don't need to fix yourself. You only need to show up. Present, honest, willing. When you enter that space, whether in silence, in nature, in dreams, in tears, you aren't going somewhere new. You're returning to a conversation your soul has been trying to have with you since the very beginning. And in that return, things begin to shift. Subtly, powerfully, you start choosing differently, speaking more gently, holding better boundaries, letting go of what no longer resonates, not out of rebellion, but from alignment. You no longer seek approval from those who can't see your essence. You no longer force what doesn't feel right. You begin to walk in integrity. And for the first time, life stops feeling like something you need to survive and starts becoming something you embody. Because you were never just a human reaching for spirit. You are a soul remembering how to be human. And that memory, it's already within you. You don't need to prove anything. You only need to trust what's rising. Let it guide you. Let it wake you up. Let it lead you home. If you've read this far, then you already know what others are still dreaming of. Don't stop here. Your story isn't finished. Your patterns aren't final. And your soul is far from broken. The Akashic records don't exist to predict your future. They exist to remind you, you are still the author. And your next chapter? It's waiting for you to write it from a place of full remembrance, full sovereignty, and full truth. If this spoke to your soul, comment, I understood.